Hi and welcome back to Computer Science for Everyone. In this video we're going to be creating the controller class. And also we're going to be explaining finally the meaning of the static keyword in the static void main method. So first of all, let's think about what a controller class is going to do, and then we'll explain the static part when we get there. The controller is going to have a list that it is the list it's going to modify and use. So it's going to be of type list, and it's going to be called list with lowercase l. Okay, so this list is what we're going to be using and adding nodes to and finding nodes in. Then we're going to have the main method in which the program is going to start. And where we're going to do everything. But before actually writing a program, we have to write a couple methods. Remember that our list had a way to add a new node, but we had to give it the node. So in this controller, we're going to create that node and give it to the add to list method in the list class so that we can actually add a node. So the method is going to be called ask node, and what this method is going to do is going to ask the user for student details here, and then create a new node with them, give this node to the lists, so this is what this class is going to do. Sorry, what this method is going to do. And then we have void find. And in here, we're going to do kind of the same thing. First of all, we're going to ask the user for the name of the student. Call the lists. So essentially here we can see that we are just interacting with the user and then calling the lists methods that we can see here. So add to list, ask node is going to create a node and give it as a parameter. Find finds a node, but it needs the name that it's going to look for. In the controller class, we're going to ask the user for that name and then call the other method with that string. And finally, also want a method that is going to print the details of a node. This one is fairly simple. System.out.println. So this is going to print the node's name as well as a couple other things. So name, matriculation number. And the year. Okay, so this is what it's going to print. And we're also going to print the next node, just for testing purposes. Okay, so we will see what that prints out when we create our list, but we'll see that later on. So we have our print details method already created. Perfect. This is the easiest method. And then we have the ask node and find method. I think the find method is easier because there's only 2 steps against 3. So let's create this one first. So we're going to need a scanner. In order to ask the user things. So not that, sorry, that's my bad. Don't need that in a scanner. We need this instead. I wear glasses, so I can't actually see the keyboard if I have the microphone in front of me. So bear with me if I make some mistakes every now and then. We need to import the class, which is up here now. And then we need to ask the user for the name of the student. Once again, I'm going to use print instead of println. And then we get it with scan.nextLine. So now we have what the user has input in this variable name. So now what we do is we call the lists method. Okay, so this is the slightly more complicated part. We have our list up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to, from this list, that is going to be full of nodes by the time we call the find method, we're going to find the node that has the name that we just gotten from the user. And remember that this find method returns a node. So we're going to get that name. If we get any nodes, we're going to put them inside this variable that is called found. And now what do we do with this variable? Well, we do print details found. This is not a good thing to do, and when we create our program, you'll see why. Just think about what if we don't find the method, what is going to happen? You can pause the video, write what I've just written, and think about what is going to happen if we don't find the node. What will happen to our program? But let's keep going. The askNode method. We are going to do pretty much the same thing as in the find method. We create the scanner. Remember that in methods, variables are not shared, so this scanner here doesn't exist inside this method here because it's a different block. So we create a scanner, enter the student name, but we're not finding it this time. We're simply adding it. So we have that, we get the name, and then that. The same thing, but to get the matriculation number instead. And finally, that for the year. Remember that after, that after calling nextInt, we need to clean, kind of, the scanner up to the line as we have seen before. So we do that this way. What this is going to do is going to go until the end of the line, read everything, so that the next time we call next line, we read the whole line and not from where we left it up to the end of the line. We've seen this in previous videos. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a video where we find this bug and we fix it. So, yeah, this is what we do so that this essentially works. Okay, so we have the name, the matriculation number, and the year. Now we need to create a new node and give it the name, matric, and year. Remember that our node has a constructor that takes two strings and one int, and those are the name, matriculation number, and year. And therefore, the node we create with this constructor is already initialized to have name, matriculation number, and year. So now this new one has the name, matriculation number, and year that we've just read from the user. And what we do is we do list, add to list, new one. So this new, this new node we've just created is what we give to the add to list method. So it gets added onto our list that is up here. Okay, so we have asked the user for student details, we've created a new node, and we've given the node to the add to list method. So now the list will have nodes as we add them with this method here. The find method is going to get the student name, put that in a new node, and then print the details. Print details is going to get a node, and it's going to print out the name, matriculation number, and year, as well as the next node. So now comes a bit more complicated bit. What is static? Static means that this method or this property is not part of the object, but of the class. What I mean is, if we had something like this, and we make it static, then if we created 3 controller objects, and we changed the age value for all of them, only the last change would remain. The 3 controllers would have the same value for age, because age would be a class property because it's static, not the object property. So whereas right now, if we create 2 controllers, these can have 2 different lists. If we made lists static, both controllers would have the same list. This is what static means. And also this is why we cannot call static things from non-static parts or vice versa. So I cannot do this. Cannot make a static reference to the non-static method askNode from type controller. So as you can see, because the main method is static, we cannot call askNode because it is not static. So how do we solve this problem? We need to create a controller object inside the main method. So we're essentially going inside the main method and creating a controller object, which is the class that is outside. And now we can do c.askNode. We can do that. This is because usually we would have some sort of engine class that would only have the main method, and would have a controller class that would have all the other methods. So we would create a new controller, and we would do askNode, and that would be totally reasonable, because the main method would be in a different class. However, it's in the same class, and there cannot be 2 objects with different main methods, so that's why it's static. And that's why we need to create an object inside the main method, because in theory it's meant to be in a different class, and it's not meant to differ between objects. So that is kind of why, I know it's a bit complicated, but just know that you can't call static or non-static things from the opposite sort of staticity, if that is a word. You can't call non-static things from static context or vice versa. So here we create our controller object, and now c.askNode is no longer calling this very method, it's calling this object's method. So it is no longer calling a non-static method from a static context. It is now calling an object that is created inside this main method. It is calling that object's method. So it's no longer calling this, it's calling this. It's a bit abstract, but if you don't really get it, try to program a lot in Java. Try to make things and get accustomed to why this is and what happens and what you do. Okay, so we have our controller and we call askNode, and this is going to indeed create the new node and add it to the list. We can do this a couple times, and then we can call find. Okay, so we're going to find one error, then we're going to fix it, and then we're going to find another error, and then we're going to fix that. Let's press play first. Enter the student name. Let's put my own name, matriculation number, student year 3. Oh, here we go. Exception in thread main, null pointer exception. And it's in this line, add to list. So we've tried adding something to the list. What does this method do if we go into the list? It checks if the head is null, and then it does that. So why is this failing? Well, null pointer exception. Null. This list is null. We have never initialized this list. By default, unless we say list equals something, list is null. We cannot call add to list on something that is null. because that gives null pointer exception. So what we have to do is we have to create a constructor for a controller object and we have to make it the list equal to a new list. And here I'm giving it a null value for head. As we remember, the constructor for the list takes a node, and this node is the head. So I'm giving a null value for it. So the first time we create ask node, we will actually change the head of the list the first time. Okay, so let's save, press play again, and see what happens. Okay, it seems like it liked it. This time we went further. That, and that, and that. Okay, so this was the adding of the students. We've added 3 students, and now it's asking us to find a student. In this instance, I know that if I type the correct one of the names in here, one of the correct names, we're going to find a node and it's going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type an incorrect name and see what happens. Voila! We get another null pointer exception error. Why? Well, the answer lies down here. We are calling the find method, which is returning a node. It's not finding it, so if you remember, we're returning null from that method. It's putting null inside found, and then we're calling print details with found, which is null. So we're giving null to this method. This method now has a node n that is null. We can't call getName on something that is null, simply because that method doesn't have any values. We can't do it. It is null, it's not a node. So what is happening here is that as soon as we're calling getName on a null object, we're getting a null pointer exception. We're trying to do something with something that's null. So we can't do that. So how do we do this then? We create an if statement. If found is not null, we print the details. Else, we print that the node was not found. Let's play that again. Now I'm going to put Greg in, and it says node not found. One last time. Now let's put a correct one. And here we go. So we get the name, matriculation number, and year, and we get the next node. This next node is the object reference to that node. It's a node that's at this, which is that. So what can we do instead of getting the object reference? We can instead get the name. n.getNext gives us the node, and instead we can get the name. So we can get the next node here, n.getNext. This is a node, and now we get that node's name. I'm going to remove one of these ask nodes because 3 is a bit too many. Or like this. Okay, now let's find a node. I put my name first, so it is Paco who is going to have a next node. I'm not going to have a next node. And here we go. So even though we put Paco first, remember how the list works. We have the head, and then we move that, and in its place, we put the next node. and that next node points to the previous head. So this is why my name is the next node, even though my name came last. Finally, what happens if I put my name? We get another error. Excellent. In here, I don't have a next node because I was the last node. So this is null. N.getNext returns null. And then I try to get the name of something that's null, and that, for a change, gives me a null pointer exception. So what I have to do here is if n.getNext is not null, then we print that. And that would fix all the errors that we have in this class. So hopefully, I know this was long, a long video, but I'm sure it's ironed out everything you could wonder about or have any questions about. But if there's something you don't understand or you want to ask further or something, go ahead and ask a question in the course page. I will answer as fast as I can. So let's move on to the next one, where we're going to be using these elements to create our queue. Don't worry, it won't be as long. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.